Hello, let's talk about Everything is Flammable, a graphic memoir by Gabrielle Bell, published in 2017. Gabrielle Bell is a British American cartoonist. She was born in England at about 2 years of age. She and her mother and brother moved back to the U.S. I was going to say Canada, back to the U.S., where she now resides in Brooklyn, New York, and has done several graphic novels. One of which I have actually reviewed in the past. 3 years ago, I reviewed way back on video number 57. I've reviewed The Voyeurs, and I'll come back to that review because I after doing all my notes, I watched that review just to refresh my memory, and it's kind of interesting how consistent I have been on my views of Gabrielle Bell. So this particular memoir, uh, Gabrielle Bell is doing sort of memoirs. I think what her Voyeurs one was called a real time comic memoir, and indeed these seem to be all little slices of her life. This one starts in 2014, the summer of 2014, where the main event that kind of kicks off the main meat of this book is her mother, who is living on the very other side of the country. Her house burns, her wilderness house burns down, and this book sort of details her going back and forth to help her mother. She gets into a trailer, and then she helps her mother purchase a tiny house, a kind of a mobile tiny house, and she meets Gus, who is this ex-con fellow who has really poor social skills, is can be violent, but is also seems quite good-hearted, and is helping his mother, is there for Gabrielle Bell's mother when she can't be, when she is indeed across the other side of the country. So Everything Flammable. The art style is very kind of it's very kind of a simple style. I like all the black cross hatchings in the work. It is for the most part a very wordy comic. It's not about grand vistas of superheroes swooping across the sky, which is probably why doing the kind of the six all the panels are 6 panels per page, 6 square panels per page, which is good because it sort of lends that kind of everyday quality to it. There's also just a thing of it's slightly claustrophobic, subdued. There's a lot of sort of stress and anxiety that resides within the Gabrielle Bell that is depicted in these pages. So that's the style and the layout kind of all work together to get that feeling, get the feeling across, because it's very much a book about sort of the stresses and anxieties of being Gabrielle Bell, I guess. The star of this book, like with The Voyeurs, which I discovered rewatching my review of that, is her relationship with her mother. Her mother has had a very hard life. It seems like her choices in partners. I'm quite sure about her that Gabrielle's father, but a lot of other men that she's had in her life have turned out to be violent and kind of angry people that have sort of left her pretty not very well capable of maneuvering life. And indeed, one of the things of this book is Gabrielle Bell, you get to feel like, oh, she's reached to this point in her relationship with her mother where she's helping her mother. She's being the roles reverse, where the parent is supposed to kind of help and nurture and take care of the child. At a certain point, the child gets old enough where they're put into sort of a caregiver role, and even a caregiver at a distance, which can make things that more stressful. And Belle herself is someone who seems to be kind of filled with anxieties. A lot of this book, you'll have moments of her just lying awake in bed with insomnia, worrying and worrying and thinking and stuff like that. There's a little side thing where she's just anxious about the little plants that are growing in her Brooklyn, her outside of her Brooklyn apartment. That she's anxious over that. So there's that kind of quotidian, but just very kind of like, oh, it's still kind of, it's that daily grind of life, which gets really well done. There's other things so there's that main kind of flow through with her mother, taking her to the DMV, working with the bureaucracy, a very huggy, small house salesman who wants to give people hugs all the time, and it's sort of just like, it's one of these kind of matter of fact things, but you also sort of feel like it feels kind of creepy. And you're kind of, it's the thing where Bell's art not being that detailed is kind of just very kind of, it's somewhat flat. You're just sort of like, you're trying to, as a reader, you're trying to figure things out, which is, it kind of pulls you into the memoir, into the story. Bell's not telling you, oh, this guy is a creep. It's just like, this guy wants to hug her and hug her mother and invite them over for to do stuff, and it's like, is he just really friendly, or is he, it feels like it's slightly creepy. So that was just something that hooked into me. Oh, there's a section here. A lot of the sections it has a fragmentary feel where you'll have like, I'm doing fine, or my friends help me. They're little subheadings, impediments. So you can see that this maybe was, while maybe is been assembled to be a whole graphic novel. It's called her first full-length graphic novel. It still feels very much of parts, and you get little segments and little snippets. There's one segment in here which is Ghost Cats, which is her remembering all the cats that she's sort of known in her life, and the kind of the sad endings that a lot of them have, finding one dead here. There's one scene where her beloved dog Freya and a couple of other Rottweilers basically they get into pack mentality, and they chase down this cat that they've taken in Red, and it does not go well. Does not go well for the cat. But it's also just sort of a thing of, these are animals, and there's things about bears in here. There's for all the kind of the talky kind of urbanite in the book, of someone who's from Brooklyn, who thankfully doesn't spend most of the story isn't Brooklyn with her Brooklyn friends, which would trigger me, because it did trigger me in the voyeurs of like, those Brooklyn hipsters, get off my lawn, get off my rural boony lawn, or whatever. But where you're just sort of tired of hearing those voices because they're so much at the center of a certain kind of publishing thing. But this escapes that, because it's much more spent with her mother, in kind of a very rural / wild space, with somebody's playing with their AK-47 over the hill. It's just like, it's a different place, so it kind of frees things up, and it's a good kind of fish out of water kind of feeling for Gabrielle Bell, where you feel like you get to know her in a much more sympathetic setting, at least for me, I guess, a sympathetic setting. I guess I would just finish off with, I had this reaction. It's funny because I went back, as I said, I went back and watched The Voyeurs, and The Voyeurs was something I said at the end of it, like, well, after I finished reading it, I didn't think too much of it. I was apt to dismiss it. And there's very much the same case with Everything is Flammable. When I finished, I went, oh, that kind of petered off. I don't know, if it was particularly anything, worth talking about. But the more I sort of sat down and I reviewed the sections, and I kind of looked at stuff, and I looked at, she got to actually, she's someone who could have like really been judgmental, really harsh on her mother, really rejected her, never talked to her, not come to her aid when the chips were down, but she did, and she went there, and she did these interviews with her, just talking about her life, and finding that she was somebody who was like really kind of damaged by her life, about the struggles of having to raise 4 kids with violent partners and things like that. And you can see her having a real empathy for her mother. And there's other things of empathy that Gabrielle Bell shows through here, which I don't think are there to pump her up as like, oh, look at how wonderful person I am, but just like, this kind of, An autobiographical memoir, you think, okay, this is going to be somebody who's just completely up their own butt. And that's not that is actually kind of one of these wonderful things with this book is like, no, she's interested in her mother. She sees a woman in on the streets who's having a drug reaction and comes to her aid, and is like, there's some empathy here, which sometimes you don't get in autobiography. You get in memoirs. It's all about me. So which makes it all the more kind of interesting, and it greatly expands the world. And I'm speaking of this as somebody who's up my own in my own head a lot of the time, and you can see someone like her who's got all this anxiety and worries, could easily be her fate as well. But there's something about, she shows herself taking notes for stuff as she's going along, and using that as kind of an excuse to talk to her mother, which you can see that this is one of these things that maybe saves her from just being an inward person who doesn't welcome in the world, which really raises this book up for me in a way that it's quite surprising, how you can how your view of a book can change over just like a couple of days of just like, oh, thinking about stuff and reflecting on it. So yeah, everything is flammable. Anxiety and you know the you have to catch things before they do, the time before time burns everything up, and you don't have that chances anymore, which yeah, yeah, that's a lesson sometimes we don't learn quickly enough. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.